Welcome to the first webinar in the 2026 DOSITS webinar series. Today we have a triple feature about using acoustic tags in uncrewed aerial systems to study cetaceans. Before I come back and introduce our speakers for today, I just have a couple items of order to go over with everyone. So if you're joining over Zoom, you should see a bar like this at the bottom of your screen. There is a tab for audio settings, and closed captioning is enabled for the session. So if you would like a transcript to be generated for you during today's webinar, is there still no audio, or are people still not able to hear me?
We can hear you, Christian. Those are local issues, I think.
Oh, okay. If you'd like closed captioning generated during today's webinar, you can enable those for yourself in the audio settings. And then you will also see two chat boxes. One is a general chat that is for people to interact with each other. People are already making use of that in today's talk. And then there's also a Q&A panel button. So if you have any questions that you would like answered either by the DOSITS panelists or by our speakers, please put your question into that chat box. And our panelists will answer it throughout the webinar, or if it is better suited that our speakers answer it, we will have a quick Q&A at the end of the webinar. So the Q&A session, or the Q&A box, will look like this. You can just type in your question there and hit send. It will be visible to all of our panelists, and then we will answer it throughout the webinar. If there are any lingering questions at the end, then we will forward them to our panelists. All questions and answers will also be posted along with a recording of the webinar on the DOSITS website at the end of today's webinar. So we will field any questions that the community has. If you're joining us over YouTube, we also want to include your questions and input. So drop your questions into the chat box on YouTube, and our panelists will copy that into the Q&A, so it is included as well. All right. So with that, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Today's topic is using acoustic tags in uncrewed aerial systems to study cetaceans. We have three speakers with us today. We have Dr. Mark Lammers. Dr. Lammers is a research ecologist at NOAA's Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary, or the HIHWMMS for short. He leads the sanctuary's research portfolio, and he is also the president and co-founder of the Oceanwide Science Institute. His research focuses on population ecology and behavior of Hawaii's humpback whales using a variety of tools, including acoustics and aerial systems. Also with us today, we have Dr. Susan Parks. Dr. Parks is a professor of biology at Syracuse University. Her research involves animal bioacoustics and focuses on the ecology and evolution of acoustic signals. Her research topics span behavioral ecology, bioacoustics, and biological oceanography, as well as conservation biology. And then finally, we also have with us Dr. David Wiley. Dr. Wiley is a research ecologist at the NOAA Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. And his research involves studying marine ecosystems that focuses on reproductive and foraging ecology of endangered whales, marine spatial planning, and conservation technology. So with that, I would like to pass off the reins to our speakers. So I believe Dr. Wiley is first up. So I will stop sharing and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Christian. It's really a thrill to be talking to the DOSITS program. You guys have a great international reputation, so to be able to share our information is kind of an exciting thing. So thank you, and thank you to all the people that have tuned in to hear this stuff. So I'm going to be talking about how we actually went about developing the use of uncrewed aerial systems, which I'm going to refer to as drones, because it's so much easier. But again, those two terms are interchangeable. So there is a paper that we published in Royal Society Open Science that you'll see on your screen now. So all the information that I'm going to be presenting is also in that paper, which I think Christian and the DOSITS team have on their website that you can download. So the people that you see here on the screen, give it another tap, are some of the most experienced people in tagging large whales on the planet. The people that are going to be driving or flying the drones for this project are Chris Zadra and Ian Kerr from Ocean Alliance. And so we formed a really nice group to really move forward the technology of trying to tag whales. Next slide, please. So the way we've been tagging whales for the last 20 or 30 years has been using a small boat and a long pole. And then you maneuver that boat up next to the whales and pop the tag on their back. Now, these are suction cup equipped tags, so there's nothing that penetrates the animal. So they just get plopped on and then they stick there. So you can see it's not a terribly invasive period. You can see the boat backing up rapidly because you're trying to get out of the way of the whales. The whale that we tagged, of course, dove. The other two really weren't disturbed at all. Next. But there is the potential for disturbance. We've never really figured out why some whales react and others don't. But certainly the reaction can be dangerous for the people involved in the tagging, since you're right on top of the animals. And certainly trying to make sure that people and whales are safe during this process is pretty much our top priority, which is why we were interested in trying to develop a method that kept people and whales a little further apart. Next, please. So we've been working with Ian Kerr and Chris Zadra from Ocean Alliance during our tagging project, primarily for photogrammetry. So they would fly the drones over the whales to get video of how large they were that we could then use to aid some of the behavioral analysis that we were doing. So all of a sudden we said, well, maybe we could actually use the drones to tag whales. And I'll talk more about how that developed in a bit. But the Ocean Alliance people were perfect for this. Next slide, please. Because they're already using drones, what they call their SnotBot program, to catch exhalation from the whales and then use that to look at hormones and other things that it turns out you can identify from the whale snot. So they were already used to positioning their drones over whales. So next slide, please. So when we decided we were going to do this, they started really taking it upon themselves to figure out how you would do this at sea by doing it at land. So we took some ballistic gel as a proxy for whale blubber and started dropping the drones or the tags from the drone on different things. So sometimes they'd have it on a cart and push around inside. Sometimes they'd tow it from a boat and drop it outside. The idea was to try to really get used to dropping tags on a moving target. And there were a lot of different aspects to doing that. Next slide, please. And we wanted to use tags that we were already using. There had been one other team in Japan that had tried to do this, and they had made a really interesting one-of-a-kind tag that didn't work too well, but they had been trying to do it with tags that were especially made for dropping from drones. We wanted to do it with the tags that we already used. And those tags were a CATS tag, you can see on the right, the large one, and a D tag, the smaller one on the left. And the following behavior of those two tags resulted in us doing things a little bit different for each tag type. I can't see my whole screen, so I'm not sure what you guys can see. Looks like on the right is a D tag with a specially 3D printed dropping mechanism that Chris Zadra created, because it turns out that the lighter D tags had a tendency to tumble when you drop them. And so they were just bouncing off the back of the foam. So Chris created this little airfoil system that would try to keep the tags falling in an upright position. The larger and heavier CATS tags could be dropped without that type of aid. They just had to be a little bit closer, and you'll see that in a second. Next slide, please. So a bunch of stuff went into preparing the tags to be dropped from a drone, because of course they're really designed for us to attach to a pole. And so you see a little thing called the topper. Can you guys see my screen? A little thing called the topper here, which Chris 3D'd, so it could attach to the drone itself. And there's a topper attached to the aerofoil that was created for the D tags. And then this is a little clamping device that would hold them until they were deployed. And this is an interesting little thing. There's you see a flotation key ring that we have, because we needed to be able to redeploy and recover this little 3D printed airfoil. So we put on this little flotation device, and that did two things. One, it kept it from sinking when we dropped it, when it bounced off the tag. You'll see that in a minute. But it also luckily became a drone or a drogue that helped upright and the tag as it was falling. So two different tag types, two different mechanisms for attaching and dropping them. Next slide, please. So then we had to go figure out how we could do it. It had never been done before, so we couldn't do it in the United States because you have a permit process that basically doesn't allow you to do new things. At least it makes it very difficult. Luckily, one of our partners and one of the co-authors, Jorge Urbana, had a permit for tagging whales in Mexico. And Ian and his team had already been doing the drone snotbot work in Mexico on blue whales. So we said, oh, well, that's great. We'll go down and do it in Mexico with blue whales because one, we could, and two, blue whales are a nice big target. So if you're going to start something, starting with a big target, there's some real advantages to that. Next picture. Next slide. So this is the setup. You can see Ian Kerr on the left about to deploy the drone with the tag attached to the bottom of it. This particular one was the D tag that you can see on the right. We've all kind of gone over what all those different pieces of the tag are. So next one, please. And these are all figures from our paper. So here we are on the left. We're dropping a D tag. On the right, we're dropping a CATS tag. You can see the difference right away. We're dropping the D tag from a much higher level. That's about 8 meters or so. And that gives it time to orient itself down. So it's going to attach in the right orientation. The heavier CATS tag, we had to tag actually from a closer elevation, because if you dropped it from too high, it would start to tumble. So by being closer to the whale, it didn't tumble, and they both stuck quite nicely. Next. So we decided to get a little fancy. We'd already dropped a CATS tag, which has a video camera in it on the whale. And then we decided, well, let's drop a D tag in front of that. So you'll see on the left screen, there's a yellow tag that's on the animal. And then the red tag drops onto it. On the right hand, you can see that red tag attaching. Go ahead. And again, these are all attached by suction cups. Next. So this is kind of the meat of the whole thing. You can see the distance from the drop, around 500 meters was the mean distance. And if you remember, when we tagged with the pole, we had to be within a couple of meters of the animal. So 500 meters versus 3 meters is really quite a difference. We actually tagged whales as far as over 1,000 meters away. I can't see the rest of that slide, but you can see over on the right-hand side with your full view that it didn't take very long, 2 minutes maybe or so to actually get a tag on. I think 43 seconds was our fastest. So you can see real advantages in both the time that it takes to get a tag on and the distance from the whale that you can be for successful tagging. Next. Okay, this is just showing you how it was really quite successful. 58% of our drops ended up in attachments to the tags. So this is a fin whale being tagged. So super successful first time out for this having never been done before. Next. Now, this is where you're working on sei whales. Susan's going to talk more about our sei whale work. But when Ian and I first decided to do this, I'd just gotten money from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to tag sei whales. And sei whales are really difficult because they don't come out to the surface very often and they don't dive deep. So they move horizontally, but you can't really see them. So you're going to see this is the drone over the whale, but this is the track that the drone drove as it was following the whale. And up here on the right-hand side, you can see what we would have seen from a boat. So the whales are really invisible from a boat point of view. The drone can stay right over them. And you can see with all this motion here, there's almost no way that we, without knowing where they were, could actually get a tag on. We did it on occasion that Susan will talk about, but for the most part, we couldn't. So if you want to go just to the end of this, there's, I think, like 3 or 4 minutes of us following this whale underwater without being able to see it at the surface from the boat angle. And then when it finally did surface, instead of being hundreds of meters away, the drone was right above it and dropped the tag on. So next slide, please. Next slide. So this is really great for hard to tag whales. They're all hard to tag, but some are even more difficult than others. Another really difficult species is North Atlantic right whales. I think you have to hit that again to get the video to run. Or maybe it's not going to run. Yeah, that's okay. But anyway, North Atlantic right whales are also quite difficult, and we've been extremely successful in tagging North Atlantic right whales. So at this point, we've tagged right whales, humpback whales, fin whales, sei whales, and blue whales. And I'm not sure if I know that Chris and Ian were trying to tag Rice's whales in the Gulf of Mexico and possibly sperm whales. So it's been we've gone from 0 whales being tagged by drones to just all sorts of animals in all sorts of environments on all sorts of places. So I think that's the end of that presentation.
Great. So I think my presentation is up next. So let me just share my presentation. Give everyone a preview. All right. Can you see my slides, or is it the presenter view? Just the slides?
The slide looks great.
Okay, perfect. Then I'll go ahead. Well, so thank you all for coming today. I'm really excited to talk about this and really happy to follow after Dave. I think hopefully you can tell after his presentation, like as a team, we're really excited about this advancement in the technology for acoustic tagging of large whales. And so he did a great job orienting you to like the history of how we did this, the history of the past 5 years of developing this technology and using it. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about a case study and an application of using these tags to study endangered baleen whales in New England waters. And so just for orientation, Dave told you a little bit about the drone system or the AUV platform. And in this image, you can see a tag being dropped from that platform from Ocean Alliance and a sei whale below with a research vessel in the distance. And so this really encapsulates sort of our new way of doing research that's very different from the pole tagging that we talked about earlier. So I wanted to sort of take a step back and just talk a little bit about the logistics of how we normally are collecting acoustic data from tags. And so the whale tag data collection process usually starts with first we have to find the whales, which some days doesn't go great, right? It sometimes can take all day to locate the species. But then we have to get close with a vessel, as Dave's demonstrated, that we have to get close enough to be able to reach them with a pole to attach the tag. And sometimes being able to get into that position can also take a lot of time. And so our sort of data collection was really often very limited to this ability to get successful vessel approaches close to the animals. These were the main limitations. And so the number of tags we could get out in a day were really by being able to find a whale that we could get a vessel close to get a tag on. One of the challenges with that as well is that if an animal was difficult to approach with a vessel for whatever region, that would be an animal that we couldn't sample. And so we also had some potential bias in the animals that we could collect data from. After the tags were attached, we would do focal follows, or we would let the whale go and track the tag remotely. And then we would have to recover the tag for the data recovery. So the approach and successful tag attachment I mentioned can be challenging. This is Alex Shorter, a professor at University of Michigan. Dave Wiley is the captain on this vessel. And so on the left, I'll show you a successful pole tagging of a fin whale in Stellwagen Bank. And so, the whale surface is in the perfect location due to excellent driving, piloting of the vessel. And so it's easy to get the tag on. But we also have situations where we have multiple whales very close to the boat, and it's really just a matter of inches of success and failure in this pole tagging. And so the second video is also Dr. Shorter trying to tag a fin whale next to the vessel and misses by a matter of inches. And this has sort of been our life for almost 20 years of deploying these tags. Is that it often can come down to a matter of inches between zero data and like an amazing data set. So I wanted to talk a little bit more in detail about the sei whale research that Dave highlighted at the end of his talk. So using these UAS systems for tagging of sei whales. These are two really fun video compilations from Ocean Alliance from that first year that we were doing this tagging in 2022. And I think it really highlights too that the sei whale, for me, they really do look very much like a fish. And so they're very interesting to sort of on the right. This is a sped up animation of the entire group of sei whales foraging near the surface, and it almost looks a little bit like a school of fish at the surface. And so, as Dave mentioned, individuals rarely come up to the surface when they're foraging in this particular habitat. And so it's been very difficult in the past for us to get suction cup tag data because you couldn't see where the whale was. They'd pop up hundreds of meters away, and then you get close to that location and they pop up hundreds of meters in another direction. So they were really challenging to work with. And so we had almost no data about sei whales in the North Atlantic in these habitats. So I'll play a quick video clip in the background of one of our first drone tag deployments on sei whales in the Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. And so what I love about this video is that, it's great imagery, it's fun to see the tag go on, but it's really this part of the video that to me as a ecologist is really important. So this animal was tagged, the vessels were hundreds of meters away, and the animal was going into a foraging lunge for feeding. It's an endangered species, and it did not interrupt its foraging behavior. And so with the close vessel approach for suction cup tagging, like the vessel approach itself was always, in most cases, the most invasive part of our research. And so we can totally decouple from that now. We can keep the vessels away from the whales and really have a minimal impact on their behavior. And so these were the first acoustic recording tags deployed on sei whales in the North Atlantic in our field season in 2022 and 2023. Dave didn't highlight this, but it was like a magical field season. He had this wonderful support from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to study sei whale behavior, and we left the harbor wondering where we would find sei whales. And about 10 miles out of the harbor, there was a huge aggregation of sei whales that normally we would never find. So it was really a fortuitous year. We were able to deploy 21 tags over the 2 years of data collection, but only 4 of those were by pole and 17 were by the UAS system, despite equal effort of the 2 platforms to deploy these tags. But it resulted in over 260 hours of data about this endangered species that we really had never had before. So this is hopefully the audio won't be too loud, but this is also a video tag going on one of these whales just to give you a sense of like the change from going from the drone, dropping to the animal, and really having sort of the whale perspective of the habitat. So what I also want to emphasize here is that this is a very productive habitat in the early spring, and so the visibility is really, really poor. And so being able to see much under the water is really limited. And so it's been very interesting to look at video data of the foraging patches that these animals are selecting, but also looking at the social interactions between different individuals. So in this particular video, there's actually a sei whale just off to the left of the tagged whale that you can sort of see very faintly, but it's right next to the tagged whale and you can barely see it. And so it's very interesting to get a perspective of the habitat that these animals are functioning in. You can see the reflection of the tagged whale itself in the surface. So it was very glassy, calm conditions when we were collecting a lot of these data. So we had two major findings from these tag deployments that, again, I think are really 100% due to the fact that we could get these tags on these animals. And so these were published in a paper led by Dana Cusano that's published in JASA, or the Journal of Acoustical Society of America, that we'll make sure is available after the webinar. But I'll play these sounds. The first one that I'm going to play, if you're not on headphones and you're on a laptop, you may not be able to hear it because it's very low frequency. But it's also a relatively quiet sound that these whales were producing. So what you may or may not have heard is a very low growly downsweep. But then we also discovered a number of these sei whales were producing low amplitude pulse calls, which I'll play next. So hopefully you were able to hear some of those at least. And so we were really surprised that these large animals that are sort of just second in size to fin whales were making very quiet calls throughout the deployments of these tags. And so it was very interesting in terms of the implications for passive acoustic monitoring for this species. The other thing, unfortunately, that the tags demonstrated to us, so we can actually recreate the underwater behavior of the whales from these tags, and I think Mark will talk more about this. We could look at the depth of these animals. And so this is a longer tag deployment where we had over 18 hours of data. The colored stars are showing where these quiet knocks and pulses occurred in the tag record over that time period, and the gray shading is showing you sort of day versus night time in terms of behavior. The black line that's sort of wiggling across the top is the depth of the back of the animal during the deployment. And this is the 5-meter depth contour that I just put up on the screen. So essentially for 18 hours, this animal maybe spent 5 minutes out of sort of a ship strike depth while it was actively foraging in this habitat. And so this is something that we saw across every whale that we've tagged in this habitat. And it was very, very surprising, right? Like you can see from some of these spikes, the habitat was not 5 meters deep. Like the animals had 50, 60, 80 meters of water they could dive in. And they were just really glued onto this one very shallow depth because of the foraging behavior that they were exhibiting. So I just want to close before I hand it off to Mark to just point out that the advantages and challenges of using US for data collection are farfold. And so this is like a whole tagging sequence of a drone taking off from our platform, going out and going to a sighting where we saw whales about 1 kilometer away. And in this single sequence that I'm going to show you, that's I think under 1.5 minutes, Chris Zadra was the pilot from Ocean Alliance, and he's amazing. He was able to come, these are fin whales in another study, and he was able to, locate those animals that we had seen in the distance, get the drone over the top of them, and deploy the tag in about 1 minute. And this is just really revolutionary for us in terms of the data collection and the amount of data that we can collect with these tags. So as a result, I want to just go back to this cycle of tagging. So these systems really offer the opportunity to increase the efficiency of data collection. Before I said finding the species and getting the vessel close, we could spend all day doing that and never be successful. Now, really, we're limited by how many tags we have and being able to recover the tags. And so if you give us 10 tags and there are 10 whales in the area, Dave Wiley was talking a little bit about the success rate. That was the success of just dropping a tag over a whale. But when I push them, and when I push Chris Zadra too, how many whales did we see that we wanted to tag that we got a tag on? And the answer is almost always 100%, which to me is just amazing. So we can pick an animal, we can pick a context, we can pick a situation where we want to collect data. And this UAS system really makes it possible for us to collect data from animals that are difficult to approach. We don't really have the bias of animals that'll let us get the vessel close to them anymore. And with that, I just have acknowledgements, like all of these studies, right? They all have huge teams and efforts and funding. But I also want to thank everyone here for their time as well. And I know at the end we'll be able to answer questions, so I'll pass it off to Mark.
Okay. Let me go ahead and share my presentation. Let's see. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, all right. Aloha, everybody. My name is Mark Lammers. I'm a research ecologist here at the Hawaiian Islands Humpback Whale National Marine Sanctuary in Maui. And just like Susan and Dave, we've been working with both tags and drones to study humpback whales. Oops, sorry, oh, there we go. So we use tags to study a variety of different types of humpback whale behavior, but also so how they use our sanctuary waters here in Hawaii. Also their acoustic signaling, both the social sounds that they exhibit, and the song that they're so well known for. And in more recent years, we've had a focus on looking at how humpback whales are affected by anthropogenic noise. And these tags are really, really valuable tools because the movement data they collect via their accelerometer, magnetometer, and pressure sensors are incredibly useful in studying the whale's behavior, both in 2 dimensions and also in 3 dimensions, as you can see in this little animation that's been created using the movement data that the tag collects. And then, as Susan and Dave have already kind of highlighted, some of these tags also have video. And these video-enabled tags provide this very important social contextual information for that movement and acoustic data. So in this case, we had tagged a yearling, and we can see that its preferred swimming formation is underneath the mother. But then also, if we examine the video, we can see that there's actually additional whales there. In this case, there was an escort that was traveling with the mom yearling. And so this provides that sort of social context for all the movement data that we observe from the sensors and the acoustic data, so the sounds that are being produced. So I'll spend the rest of my time here highlighting how we're using these tools, specifically to look at how anthropogenic noise is impacting humpback whales or potentially affecting humpback whales, and specifically vessel noise. So I'm going to start kind of from the beginning of how we got onto this. And so a few years ago, we were out tagging humpback whales, and we tagged a whale and a dyad, or a pair of whales, that was traveling off of West Maui. And shortly after tagging, about 20, 30 minutes after we tagged the whale, the 2 whales separated, and our whale stopped and started doing these stereotype dives and started singing. And he performed about 20 stereotype dives during which he sang. Now, after about 10 of these dive cycles, a tug towing a large barge, about a 100-foot tug towing about a 300-foot barge carrying Inter Island cargo, came through the channel here in Maui, and it's a regular occurrence, happens almost every day, and passed really close to our singing whale, maybe about 400 meters away. And so during 3 of the dive cycles, there was a lot of noise from that tug and barge passing by. And so what we observed in the dive data is that while that noise was present, the whale's dives started to be were deeper and much more variable than when the barge noise was present. Some of the dives were cut short, and so we can see that the whale became pretty unsettled when the barge noise was present. But then after the barge passed, he kind of went back to his normal diving behavior. When we look at the acoustic data, we also saw something super interesting. Here in this figure, you can see each song represented by these horizontal bars. So each one of these horizontal bars represents one iteration of the song, and each of the vertical bars represents an individual song unit. And so what you can see is that the song structure, in terms of the units, phrases, and themes that the whale produced, was very consistent during the 10 cycles before the tug and barge went by. When the noise was present, the songs were cut short, and entirely new units began to be produced, which was something we had never seen before. Was kind of an unexpected finding. But then, interestingly, again, once the noise subsided, those new units disappeared, and the song structure went back to normal. So this observation led us to wonder, well, okay, if this was an opportunistic observation, but how often does vessel noise disturb whale behavior? Is this a regular thing, or is this relatively rare? And we asked this because the waters in our off of West Maui, where the heart of our sanctuary is very dense with humpback whales. but also is quite dense with vessel traffic. Vessel traffic is used extensively in Hawaii in general, but off of Maui in particular. There's lots of fishing, recreational, commercial fishing. It's used for transportation. I already mentioned sort of the tug and barge, but also moving people between islands. And then, of course, we have a lot of ecotourism, lots of whale watching, lots of snorkel trips, and that kind of thing. So we decided to design an experiment to examine the behavioral response of humpback whales to vessel noise using a playback paradigm. And basically, and here's where the drone tagging comes in, because we went out, we decided we're going to go out and put tags on these whales, but we wanted to work with relatively stationary whales, because the whales in Maui and in Hawaii in general, they spend quite a bit of time in these stationary states where they're just basically not moving. And so it's an important behavioral state, kind of resting state. And this is, by the way, this is Chris Zadra again piloting. I think Dave said that their shortest time from takeoff to deployment was 43 seconds. This was actually 24, so we may have the record here in Hawaii for that. But we want to work with stationary whales because, again, it's an important behavioral state. And so the important thing, as Susan has already and Dave have already highlighted, is that through the drone tagging, you can put the tag on the whale and not disturb the whale's behavior. Because in the past, when we were using pole tagging, even when we're working with whales that were fairly stationary resting, by approaching them and pole tagging them, that caused them to usually change their behavior and start moving or doing something else. So the drone tagging was really key to this process. And then once the whale is tagged, we would expose them to playback experiments using a number of recorded sounds. One was a recording of our own research vessel transiting at about 20 knots or so a fast-moving vessel. That was about a 3-minute recording, and then another was of that tug and barge, also a 3-minute recording of that. And then for comparison, we also played some social sounds that were recorded from competitive pods. So aggressive sorts of social situations where males are competing with each other. So two different types of social sounds from that sort of context to see how those would differ between, from the anthropogenic sounds. And so what we found was that the response rate varied quite a bit among the different sound types. For the vessel sounds, we found that there was a higher response rate to that fast-moving recording of the fast-moving research vessel compared to the slower-moving tug and barge sound. But then we also found some interesting differences between the two different social sounds. One social sound elicited a response almost every time, whereas the other one much less so. We also found that the response rate also varied among the different pod types, with singers being the most sensitive to acoustic disturbance. So they responded almost 90% of the time. They would show some sort of a response, which is interesting because they themselves, of course, are producing a lot of very high volume sound through their song, but they apparently are also very, very sensitive to the acoustic environment around them. So then I'll just finish off by talking a little bit about a project that we're just getting going. We're very excited about this, and that is to use drones and tags in order to try to study whale hearing. So as you can imagine, the hearing abilities of whales, of large whales, can be difficult to study. And so they're, as a result, they're pretty poorly understood. There's been some progress in last couple of years with some work in Iceland and in Australia. But generally speaking, there's still very, very little that's known about baleen whale hearing. And so, when you normally try to study hearing in human or captive animal studies, you can simply ask the subject or train them to respond when a sound is heard. Now, in cases when training is not possible, such as if you're working, let's say, with an infant or a stranded animal, you can use electrophysiological methods. And in this case, you attach electrodes to the subject's head, and then you're able to measure the actual nerve impulses that are carried from the auditory system into the brain. And you're basically measuring what's known as the auditory brainstem response, or looking at auditory evoked potentials. So this is a method you can use for when you don't have the ability to train animals, but you still need to have some ability to actually attach these to an animal. So you have to have some level of control over the animal and being able to keep it restrained. So the question, that we had is, is there a way to measure hearing of a free-ranging cetacean like a large whale? And it turns out that as of the last couple of years, the answer is yes, and that's because my colleague Adam Smith, working together with Mark Johnson, Adam Smith is at Southern Denmark University. They developed a variation of the D tag that makes it an electrophysiological tag. So it's a regular D tag, but they've been able to add some features to it. They've added these suction cup electrodes that are actually able to measure nerve impulses. So that allows them to study hearing and be able to measure auditory brainstem responses from free-ranging cetaceans, and they've been able to demonstrate this in working with the harbor porpoise. So you can see in that picture there on the bottom, they were able to take this D tag, this AVR D tag, put it on a temporarily restrained harbor porpoise, and let the porpoise swim freely. And using the porpoise's own echolocation clicks, we're able to measure the AVRs that were being generated and then create an audiogram. So this is kind of a revolutionary new way of studying hearing in free-ranging cetaceans. Of course, it's one thing to temporarily restrain a small harbor porpoise. It's an entirely different thing to try to do this with a large baleen whale. So Adam and I were at a conference a couple of years ago, and we thought, okay, we were talking, and so we thought, is there some way that we could possibly do this with a large baleen whale? And so the question is, how do you deploy this type of tag that is not just a simple tag? It's a tag with things sticking out of it, reference electrodes that need to be placed a certain distance away. And so we said, well, let's go talk to the people who basically know how to do this kind of thing better than anybody else. And that's, of course, Ian and Chris at Ocean Alliance. And so we met with them and asked them, hey, do you think this is doable? This is possible? And they said, well, let us think about it. And sure enough, a couple of months later, they came back to us and said, yeah, we think this is possible. And they came up with this system, which we like to call the Gyrosaurus, which is it's a drone-based dual gyroscope release mechanism. It basically is able to deploy both the ABR tag with the reference electrode at a distance of about a meter away, simultaneously drop them while being stabilized by gyroscopes. And we were able to do some pilot testing of that this past whale season. So this is footage just from last February, and you can see here the drone flying over a humpback whale. This is a mother with her calf. And you can see it once again, Chris flying, and the ABR tag with the suction cup electrode going onto the whale. So getting onto the whale is the first step in the process, and so that's wonderful that worked. But the other really important thing is that the placement of the electrodes is critical for ABR measurements. And so we estimate that in order to successfully record ABRs from a whale, we probably have to be somewhere within about 50 centimeters or so of the blowhole. So basically, we try to be right over the brain. And so what we've so far demonstrated with our pilot effort is that the drone deployment system works, and with really good piloting, i.e., working with Chris, precise placement is possible. So we're very excited about this. We have a proposal and it's being reviewed. So we're hoping that over the next few years we'll be able to continue this work. But the other exciting thing is that in addition to ABRs, the tag also is able to collect heart rate. So that was something that was very clear in the data right away. And so we're also hoping that we may be able to use heart rate in order to study hearing as well by looking at perhaps changes in heart rate as whales are exposed to different types of sound. So I'll just finish off again by giving some acknowledgements to all of our collaborators that we work with in our tagging work, of course, our staff and our support for the work that we do. And hopefully we have a little bit of time and we can switch over to questions and discussion.
Thanks again to our speakers. Really incredible and amazing research, really interesting work. We have a lot of questions in the chat. So I'll do my best to sort of summarize and direct them to you guys as appropriate. For our audience, just so you are all aware, if there are questions that are not explicitly answered during this session, we will also be writing answers and posting the Q&A as a separate document on the web page where the webinar recording will be posted. So if you had a question and you put it in the Q&A and it doesn't happen to get answered right now, it will still get answered, and that answer will be available for you on the website. So we have a couple questions that are about the tags themselves. One participant asks, how long do the tags usually stay on whales, and are you able to recover and reuse them after, if they come unattached?
Sure, I can tackle that one. I don't know who wants to go. We all have probably the same similar answers, right? So the tags stay on anywhere from 0 seconds if they don't attach well to maybe up to about 48 hours is about the longest we've had. I would say typically we've been working really hard over the past decade to try to improve like suction cup technology and the structure of the suction cup. And other approaches that, maybe we used to have an average of attachment of 8 to 10 hours, and now we're getting closer to an average that's approaching 24 hours. But they are short-term attachment tags, and that's part of the goal is that they're high resolution, and we have to get them back because they're archival. They're not sending the data back to us. And so we don't really want the whale to get too far with our tag, and sometimes they can get pretty far in a day.
Yeah, and I'll add that in some cases you want long attachments because you're trying to get as much data as you possibly can. In other situations, in our case, for example, we're using them in an experimental context. We actually just want them to be on for 2 or 3 hours, and there are ways that you can either some tags you can program, like D tags you can program when they come off. Others you can set up so that the suction cups actually get flooded after a predetermined amount of time. So we're able to actually determine if we want the tag to come off after 3 hours, it'll come off. But in many cases, people want them to stay on as long as possible. And then, as Susan indicated, you have to recover them, and we do that via VHF transmitters that allow us to find the tag, and in some places Argos as well that allow us to locate them in the ocean if they're more widely dispersed.
Right, because they're designed to float once they become detached, so that's kind of a key aspect of it.
Is there any?
We need to get them back.
There's a follow-up to this question. How does the retention of the drone-applied tag compare to other tag application methods like the pole? Do we find that there's a higher or lower retention rate in the AUS or UAS applied D tags?
Yeah, that's a great question. We looked at that, and we really haven't found any significant difference between the pole and the UAS tags. Partly because once the tag is on, they're reseated when the animal dives deep, so that kind of reattaches the suction cup because of the water pressure. So once they're on, it's kind of independent of what put them on.
Yeah, we've had the same experience. We don't really notice a difference between pole attached tags and drone attached tags. I think that the level of attachment is I think very, very similar.
Well, thank you for your answers. I'm just looking for any other questions that might be related to the tags. Right. We have a couple other questions about behavioral reactions. Do you notice if there are any behavioral changes in the whale due to the presence of the drone?
I can start. We do know it's not that there are no behavioral responses. Whales can respond to the drone. It depends on sort of how the drone is flown to some degree. We've also noticed a little bit the surface conditions can sometimes make a little bit of a difference. If it's really flat and really calm, sometimes we think the sound of the drone kind of penetrates the water a little bit better, and they can be alerted to it. But it's very variable. Some whales seem to be a little bit more sensitive. Others don't seem to care very much. There's certainly much less response than to an approaching vessel, for sure.
Sense. A lot of questions flooding in here at the last minute. We have some questions about what the data is used for, and if it's able to be used to help prevent vessel strikes and other types of harmful effects on whales. I know that this research is is obviously very important for understanding whale behavior and their diving behavior. Is that then translated into vessel collision and vessel strike preventative measures?
I'm going to say Dave's the best one to answer this because he's done the most of going from our basic data to actually applied conservation. So.
Yeah, the whole purpose really is to understand whale behavior so we can keep them safe from people. You can't really change whale behavior. You have to change human behavior, but you can only do that effectively if you know what the whales are doing. So by combining what people are doing and what whales are doing, we've been fairly successful in doing things like moving shipping lanes to reduce the co-occurrence of whales and ships, looking at how they use the water column for entanglement, so using that to try to work with fishermen to redesign fishing gear. So the whole purpose really is to understand whale behavior so we can keep them safer from human behavior. Because the only one we can change is human behavior.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that the work that I just sort of touched on with looking at whale responses to vessel noise is sort of geared towards that. We want to understand how whales respond to vessel noise so we can provide a little bit more effective guidelines, hopefully for the vessels operating in our sanctuary waters. So like Dave said, it's just about understanding the issue better so that we can come up with more effective guidance.
Well, thank you all for your answers, and again, thanks for your presentations today. Lots of engagement, lots of questions in the chat, so we will be sending those to you for more detail after the webinar ends. But I'm going to share my screen here just because we have a couple minutes left, and we have a couple more things to get to. So once again, thank you to all of our speakers today, and thank you to all of our participants. This couldn't happen without all of you, so we obviously really appreciate it here at DOSITS. Moving forward, this was our first webinar in the 2026 webinar series. So if you attend this one and you attend the 3 remaining for the rest of the year, you can receive a professional development certificate from DOSITS. If you registered for this webinar using an email and you are attending over Zoom, you should receive an email after this webinar ends with information about the professional development certificate. If you open the chat, I think several of our panelists have also posted the link to the professional development certificate, and as well as the webinar survey in the chat. So please fill those out if you're interested, and please register and attend the remaining webinars in 2026 if you would like to receive that professional development certificate. You'll also see a questionnaire for the DOSITS webinar. This just helps us continue to improve these webinars and the experience for our speakers and our participants. So if you have any feedback for us, there is an option for you to let us know using the survey. And then please join us for our next webinar. Our next webinar is called Observing the Changing Arctic Ocean with Acoustics, and that will be on April 29th, 2026 at 12 p.m. Eastern. So we are looking forward to seeing all of you there. And with that, that concludes today's webinar. So once again, thank you, Mark, Susan, and David. Really interesting stuff. Thank you for your time, and yeah, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.